every American president in history has addressed the members of the military at vital moments in our country's history with care and intention and deep respect. It sounds something like this.
The people of this country do not appreciate how secure we are because of the devotion of men and their wives and children who serve this country in far-off places, in the sea, in the air, and on the ground, thousands and thousands of miles away from this country, who make it possible for us all to live in peace each day.
You all knew that some things are worth dying for. One's country is worth dying for, and democracy is worth dying for because it's the most deeply honorable form of government ever devised by man.
Freedom is not an accident. Progress is not an accident. Democracy is not an accident. These are things that have to be fought for. And you're part of that legacy. They must be won, and they've got to be tended to constantly and defended without fail.
But this president, the one we have now, the guy who once described the ultimate sacrifice, military members losing their lives, as ones being made only by, quote, losers and, quote, suckers, sounded very different today.
I've never walked into a room so silent before. This is very... Oh, don't laugh, don't laugh. You're not allowed to do that. You know what? Just have a good time. I moved a submarine or two, I won't say about the two, over to the coast of Russia, just to be careful, because we can't let people throw around that word. I call it the N-word. There are two N-words, and you can't use either of them. You can't use either of them. And I'm not a fan of some of the ships you do. I'm a very aesthetic person, and I don't like some of the ships you're doing aesthetically.
I was just taking notes to make sure I really heard what I heard. As you just heard and saw, Donald Trump played the part of Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces today. He gave a speech before senior military leaders. It was, at turns, awkward, embarrassing. The whole thing was incredibly low energy, and the substance of what he said was deeply disturbing. The Trump administration dragged hundreds of the nation's top generals from posts all around the world for an event just hours ahead of a potential government shutdown. It's an event that presented all sorts of operational and logistical challenges and hardships and raises red flags about whether the military will be able to handle a crisis should something happen today or tomorrow while they're on their way back. As these images attest, the nation's senior military leaders, for the most part, sat in stone-faced silence as Trump talked at them for more than 1 hour. But in between the political attacks he made and the ranting and raving and meandering he did deliver a message that should alarm anyone who cares about the men and women in that room, or the institution of the military, or the Constitution, or democracy here and around the world. Because Donald Trump actually spent a good amount of time today laying the groundwork for the United States military to regularly and increasingly, and perhaps indefinitely, be deployed on the streets of American cities.
While America is under invasion from within, we're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms. But we are under invasion from within. I told Pete we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military.
That's where we start today. MSNBC Pentagon correspondent Priya Sardar is here. Also joining us, former Secretary of the Air Force and a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, Secretary Frank Kendall is here. Retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Steve Anderson is here. And retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel and co-founder of the Truth in the Barrel podcast, Amy McGrath is here. Priya, I start with you for the headlines.
Yeah, that's right. So this speech came immediately following Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's speech, where he really railed against the Department of Defense and went into talking about why it has been rebranded the Department of War. And he said the reason for that is because the Department of Defense had become too woke. And he said that in order to essentially fix it, they needed to really roll back many of those DEI policies that he felt the previous administration put into place. And I know we're going to go into more detail about exactly what he rolled out today, but he essentially issued 10 new directives from the Department of War that these senior military leaders are now going to be required to implement. And a lot of them are changing things like grooming standards and physical standards. And he said that, you know, if the result of that is that we don't have women in combat roles anymore, then so be it. He also said that, you know, he wants to get rid of what he called debris. And he was essentially referring to a lot of the senior military leaders that he fired earlier this year. Many of them, by the way, were women and people of color who he says were promoted because of essentially trying to meet quotas, according to him, or being historic first. So when President Trump took the stage, he basically said that he agrees with everything that Defense Secretary Hegseth put into place, also calling this Department of Defense woke department. So that was really the tone that we saw today. As you mentioned, there wasn't much reaction from the audience, which is what was to be expected. Remember, these military leaders took an oath to the Constitution and the Commander-in-Chief, regardless of political party or persona. But President Trump also made kind of a joke and a little bit of a veiled threat. And he said, if you guys don't applaud or laugh at my jokes, I will reduce you in rank. And that did elicit a little bit of a laugh from the crowd. But as you mentioned, a lot of the speech was very political in nature.
Priya, Trump said, quote, "We are under invasion from an enemy within." Who is that enemy and where have they invaded?
So according to the president, he said that he has spoken to Pete, as he called him, about using our military troops to train in domestic cities because he said they are very dangerous places. And the two cities that he referred to in his speech were Chicago, where he was talking about the incompetence of Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. And he referred to a lot of murder statistics from over the weekend. And he said that the military is needed to bring those crime rates down. And then he also went on to talk about Portland, Oregon. And he said, I have spoken to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem about using the military troops in cities where potentially ICE detention facilities are under threat from Antifa or other domestic terrorists, he called them, who are protesting outside of those facilities. So he said he's not afraid to deploy more troops across the country in these cities, and he actually thinks that those could potentially be really great training grounds for the military to train for wars overseas.
But is it clear to you who the enemy within is? Which people?
I mean, as usual, he didn't necessarily define things in specific terms. But of course, in recent weeks, we have heard a lot of rhetoric from him about labeling domestic terrorist organizations and left-wing groups. And so that seemed to be what he was alluding to. But again, you know, these are things that aren't necessarily discussed with senior military leaders. These are politics and policy decisions with people who are looking for direct orders, operational cues, how to implement these things, not necessarily all the politics behind what they have to execute on the ground. But needless to say, you know, we've seen this administration deploy troops to the border when he was talking about trying to harden the border. And then we also saw troops being deployed to Los Angeles. So we've seen this consistently over the past several months, and now they're being used in this new capacity to essentially try to squash any sort of crime and also any people that could be resisting some of his immigration policies and ICE raids across the country.
Secretary Kendall, in 2018, the invasion was used to describe a mirage of a caravan racing toward the southern border. There was no horde caravan racing toward the southern border. The invasion was something that he would go to the Roosevelt Room and warn about and talk about in the days leading up to the midterm elections. The enemy within is language he adopted during this year's presidential cycle. And he used it in interviews with Univision and Telemundo, as well as with journalists or cable hosts like Laura Ingraham, who would push back and almost try to move him off a designation of political opponents as a, quote, enemy within. He has combined two of the most dangerous rhetorical devices he's deployed since he's entered American politics. And he said to a room today of our country's top military leaders that he needs their help, or he plans to deploy them, because we are, quote, under invasion from an enemy within. He's now melded the invasion that he's long used to describe people coming to this country as asylum seekers or illegally or undocumented with language that he re-upped about a week ago, Sunday, about his opponents, saying, quote, I hate them. Where does this leave the military?
Well, first of all, Nicole, the summary earlier was fairly accurate. I listened to both Secretary Hegseth's speech and President Trump's speech in their entirety, and I really encourage people to do that. I would describe them as bizarre, unhinged, and most importantly, as you indicated earlier, dangerous. This is part of a pattern we're seeing from the administration of demonizing their political enemies. I don't think there was any confusion in particularly President Trump's speech about who those were. Radical left, Democratic mayors were specifically referred to. So we're seeing a continuation of the pattern that you talked about from earlier, and a campaign, if you will, to demonize his political opponents and to make it acceptable to use the military against them, including in our cities. And it's a very dangerous time for our country.